Today we'll be talking about a man who survived alone in the wilderness for 27 years. Christopher Knight, a 20 years old man who parked his car on a remote trail in Maine and walked away with only the most basic supplies. The reason behind all this was to isolate himself from people. He had no specific plan at the moment. Christopher was only 20 years old when he walked away from society, not to be seen again for more than a quarter of a century. He had been working for less than a year installing home and vehicle alarm systems near Boston, Massachusetts town right away. He did not even give in a notice to his boss when he quit the job. At the time, Christopher did not tell anyone where he was going. After interviewing Christopher, he mentioned that at the time he had no one to tell. He did not have any friends. He had no interest in his co-workers as well. He drove down the east coast of America, eating only fast food and staying in cheap motels. He wanted to make it as cheap as possible because of the money he had at the time. Even in the interview, he mentioned he was looking for the cheapest motels he could find in that area. Christopher traveled for days until he found himself deep into Florida, alone, sticking mostly to major roads just to be safe as much as he can, and watching the world go by. He listened to the radio for the most part when he was walking by the road. He turned around and headed north. All throughout his life, he had been comfortable being alone. Interacting with others was so often frustrating for him. Every meeting with another person seemed like a collision to Christopher. He drove north to Maine, where he had grown up. There aren't many roads in that center of the state, and he chose the one that went right by his family's house. Christopher stated, "I think it was just to have one last look around to say goodbye." He said that he didn't stop. The last time he saw his family home was through the windscreen of his car. He kept going up north, up and up. Soon he reached the shore of Moosehead Lake, which is the largest in Maine, and the point where the state begins to get truly remote. He stated, "I drove until I was nearly out of gas. I took a small road, then a small road off that small road, then a trail off that road." He went as far as he can into the wilderness as his vehicle could take him. Christopher parked the car and tossed the keys on the center console. He only had a tent and a backpack, but no compass, no map. Without knowing where he was going, with nothing specific placed in his mind, he stepped into the wilderness and walked away. His final gesture, leaving his keys in the car, was pretty strange. Christopher was raised with a keen appreciation of the value of money, and the car was the most expensive item he had ever purchased. And why didn't he hold on to the keys as a safety net? What if he didn't like camping out? As Christopher stated, The car was of no use to me. It had just about zero gas, and I was miles and miles away from any gas stations in that area. As far as anyone knows, the car is still there, half swallowed by the forest. Christopher said that he didn't really know why he left at the time. He had given the question plenty of thought, but had never arrived at a specific answer. It's a mystery so far, even for people and even for Christopher himself. There have been hermits, monks, swamis at all times in recorded history across the world, across all the cultures. But there are really only three general reasons why people leave the world and isolate themselves completely. Most do so for religious purposes, to make a closer bond with a higher power, or as they called God. Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha all spent significant time alone before introducing a new religion to the world. In Hindu philosophy, every ideally matures into a kind of hermit, and today, at least 4 million people live as wandering holy men in India, surviving off the charity of strangers. Other hermits opt out of civilization because of hatred of what the world has become. They have too much knowledge, real knowledge about how the world works, and they just wanted to leave all that behind and live a peaceful, isolated life. And the final category includes those who wish to be alone for reasons of artistic freedom, scientific insight, or deeper self-understanding. But why Christopher's case is very mysterious, and he does not fit in any of these categories that I have just mentioned. He did not follow any formal religion. He was not protesting against modern society or what was going on in the world. He produced no artwork. He never took a photograph or wrote a sentence. Not a single person knew where he was because he had no friends, no family at the time. His back was fully turned to the world. There was no clear reason for what he chose to do. Something he couldn't quite pinpoint had tugged him away from the world with the persistence of gravity. He was one of the longest enduring hermits in history, and among the most passionate as well. Christopher Knight was a true hermit. As he mentioned, I cannot explain my actions. I had no plans when I left. I wasn't even thinking of anything. I just did it. As much as we can figure out from Christopher's story, his goal was to get lost. Not just lost to the rest of the world, but actually lost in the woods by himself. He carried only rudimentary camping supplies, a few articles of clothing, and a little food. He said, "I had what I had, and nothing more." It is not easy to get truly lost like he did. Anyone with basic outdoor skills generally knows which way they are heading. The sun burns west across the sky, and from there, it is natural to set the other directions. Christopher knew that he was heading south. He said that he didn't make a conscious decision to do so. Instead, he felt pulled in that direction like a homing pigeon. He said there was no depth or substance to the idea. It was at the instinctual level. It's instinct among animals to return to home territory, and my home ground, where I was born and raised, was that way, Christopher said. He also stated, I kept largely to the ridges and sometimes crossed swamps going from one ridge to another. Christopher worked his way along crumbled slopes and muddy wetlands. He stated that soon I had lost track of where I was, I did not care. I would camp in one spot for a week or so, then head south yet again. I just kept going. I was content in the choice that I had made. Content except for one thing, which was food. Christopher was hungry, and he really didn't know how he would feed himself because he had no specific plan. His departure from the outside world has a confounding mix of incredible commitment and complete lack of forethought. He was an able hunter and angler, but he took neither a gun nor even a rod with him. Still, he didn't want him to die, at least not at that time. Christopher's idea was to forage. The wilds of Maine are monumentally broad, though not generous. There are no fruit trees. It is full of wetlands and swamps, spiders, snakes, crocodiles. Berries sometimes have a long weekend season. Without hunting or trapping or fishing in that area, an average person is going to starve. But Christopher walked his way south, eating very little day by day until paved roads appeared. He found a road-killed partridge, but did not possess a stove or a way to easily start a fire, so he ate it raw. Neither a tasty meal nor a hearty one, and a good way to get sick. He passed houses with gardens, but was raised with rigid morals and a great deal of pride. Over the next few months, Christopher tried living in several places in the area, including inside a dank hole in a riverbank, all without satisfaction. Finally, he stumbled upon a region of nasty boulder-choked woods, without so much as a game trail running through it. It was far too harsh for hikers, but he liked it immediately. Still, he remained hungry. Christopher was beginning to realize that it is almost impossible to live by yourself all the time. You need help. Hermits across the history often ended up in deserts or mountains or woodlands, the sorts of places where it was extremely difficult to find or catch all year-on food. When he arrived at his chosen cabin, he would make sure there were no vehicles in the driveway, no sign of someone inside. Burglary is a dicey business with a very low margin for error. One mistake and the outside world would snatch him back. So Christopher crouched in the dark and waited, sometimes for hours. As per him, he enjoyed being in the dark. He never risked breaking into a home occupied year-round, and he always wore a watch so he could monitor the time. Sometimes cabins were left unlocked. Those were the easiest to enter, though soon other places became nearly as simple. Christopher had keys to them, found during previous break-ins. He stashed each key on its respective property, typically under some nondescript rock. He created several dozens of these stashes and never forgot where one was. He noticed when several cabins left out pens and paper, requesting a shopping list, and others offered him bags of supplies hanging from a doorknob. But he was fearful of traps or tricks or initiating any sort of correspondence, even a grocery list. So he left everything untouched, and people stopped. As the local residents invested in security upgrades after the previous break-ins, Christopher adapted it. He knew about the alarms from his one paying job that he used to work at. He used his knowledge to continue stealing, sometimes disabling systems or removing memory cards from surveillance cameras. Sometimes later, a theft report filled by another officer specifically noted the crime's unusual neatness. The hermit many officers felt was a master thief. It was as if he were showing off, picking locks, yet stealing very little, playing a strange sort of game. When Christopher used to break in and finish with the inside of the cabin, he would check the gas grill to see if the propane tank was full. If so, then there was an empty spare lying around. He would replace the full one with an empty, making the grill appear untouched. Then he would load everything into a canoe, if he had borrowed one, and paddle to the shore closest to his camp to unload. He would return the canoe to the spot he had taken it from, sprinkle some pine needles on the boat to make it appear unused, then haul his loot up through the dense woods between the rocks to his home. Christopher was finally arrested after 27 years of complete isolation while stealing food at a lakeside summer camp. He was charged with theft and taken to the local jail. His arrest caused enormous commotion. Letters and visitors arrived at the jail, and approximately 500 journalists requested an interview. A documentary film team showed up. Everybody was curious and wanted to know, what would the hermit say? What insights had he gained while he was alone? Everybody's mind was running wild with questions and curiosity. People have been approaching hermits with similar requests for thousands of years, eager to consult with someone whose life has been so radically different to their own. When he was in an introspective mood, Christopher seemed willing, despite his typical aversion to dispensing wisdom, to share more of what he gleaned while he was alone in the woods. The journalist asked him some grand insight revealed to him in the wild, and Christopher sat quietly, but he eventually arrived at a reply. He said, "Get enough sleep." Christopher set his jaw in a way that conveyed he wouldn't be saying any more. This was what he learned. It was, without question, the very truth.